Welcome to this series for new players for Workers and Resources Soviet Republic. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at farming and food and alcohol production. Now, this video will consist of 4 parts. The first part will be a quick overview of the basics of farming, why you would raise crops, and that will focus mainly on fields. The second part will be setting up the farm. The third part will be setting up food and alcohol production. And then at the end, what I will do is a quick comparison between farming when you're not playing with seasons enabled and when you are playing seasons enabled. For anyone who wants to jump forward to a specific part in the video, there will be timestamps available. And before we get into the first part, I want to mention 2 things. First thing, this is not a video on optimizing farming. If you want to see that, I suggest going to Bill Joe's channel, and he does a very good tutorial on full optimization of farming to get the maximum capacity out of the available fields. And the second thing I want to emphasize is that this video focuses very much on farming when you are not playing with seasons enabled. And it's worth mentioning that that is a very important difference, which will become apparent as the video goes on. So let's just get straight into part 1, and we're going to start with the absolute basics. And if you come down to the bottom here, you'll see that there's a little icon that says food, alcohol and crops. If you click on that, what you will see is we now got another submenu come up, and this consists of 4 parts, which is crops, which basically means farming, food production, alcohol and meat. Now, for the purposes of this video, meat is out of scope, but, and this is something that I really want to emphasize from the get-go, is crops is the way to get a good start if you've got available flat land, and more importantly, building a very strong self-sufficient economy. And the reason for that is that crops is one of those resources that you are going to need lots of, and it's needed in so many different levels. And just to show you those levels, the obvious one is food. We're going to need 42 tons of crops per day to get the maximum of 20 tons of food. Alcohol as well, that needs 30 tons of crops per day to produce some alcohol. And then more interesting here is a livestock farm. Now, a livestock farm, it needs crops to raise the livestock, which then can be turned into meat. And each livestock farm will require 20 tons. Now, it goes even further than that, because if we go to the clothing industry here, if we show you the fabric factory, now a fabric factory needs 20 tons of crops and 0.5 tons of chemicals to produce 5 tons of fabric. So that's another demand. And then quite interestingly, in the fact that the fabric factory uses chemicals, and if we go to, I think it's fossil fuels, we go to chemicals, you'll see that in order to manufacture chemicals, we need 0.78 tons of crops to produce 0.81 tons of chemicals. And I think that demonstrates quite clearly that many of the other products that you can produce within your own economy are dependent on crops. And I think this is very important to understand, that as your economy expands, and if you want to move towards self-sufficiency, you are going to be building a lot of farms. And that's why it's quite important to understand how farming works. And I've already mentioned it's a good way to get some early cash in the game, because the other thing you need to be aware of is that farming can be fully automated. You don't need workers to raise crops, although there is one exception that I will be talking about. Anyway, let's just get into the real basics, which is if we come in here, we look at the fields, you can see we've got small fields, medium fields, big fields. Now, what I will say from the get-go, guys, is small fields are pretty much a waste of time in farming. They're really there to, if you want to do an early start and you want to look at something that's aesthetically pleasing, or if you've got a very small area like here and you'd suddenly decide a compelling urge to put a field in like that. But what I'm going to be focusing on is medium and large fields. But first I want to do is give you the proportions. Now, 3 small fields equal 1 medium field. If I click on here, you'll see that a small field is 0.39 hectares and a medium field is 1.57. 3 small fields are roughly 1.2 hectares, which is pretty close to the medium field, but there are some losses. And then that also applies the fact that 3 medium fields, which is the 1.5, goes through to 4.81. This time round, the ratio is a lot closer. And this is the reason why you actually use large and medium fields. Now, I'll come back to talk about what's in the contents here. First, I want to just talk about actually laying out fields. It's quite straightforward. Fields are free, so you can there's no cost. You can put them anywhere you want as long as the land is reasonably flat. Now you can go up hills and you can get this slightly distorted, but you can still see the green dots. So you can actually put a field like this, come in here, and the way to check is the fact that it's still 4.81 hectares. So you can go up slopes, but what you've got to watch for is the gravel texture, because if I do the same here, so if we put a big field here, you see that the game will give the impression that you can put it, but if you go too far, it will tell you that there's too many stones. If you do that, now you think you've got the field, but if you look here, that's your field is being reduced to, which is 1.6 hectares. So you've lost 3 hectares because of the rocks. So you can't build over rocks. So that's something that you do need to be aware of when you're planning. Also, you can creep a little bit close to water, but it can be, the game can be a little bit technical. You can see, so you can actually go there. But again, you can see that we've lost a little bit of terrain to the water. So the game is quite flexible when you place your fields. It is possible to get the maximum out of even relatively uneven territory as well. So what we're going to do now is move on. I'm just going to talk you through the information that's in the fields. At the top, you see you get some warnings. It says this field is not assigned to any farm, which is obvious we got no farm. Field requires workers and mechanisms to harvest or seed. And these are just warnings because as I'm going to demonstrate, you don't need a farm necessarily to raise crops. Now, the next thing down, which can be a little bit confusing for new players, says workers in this field 250 maximum. Now, that indicates that workers can work in a field, but they are not essential. You can farm with just machinery in the form of a tractor and a harvester, and of course a covered hole to pick the crops up. So if we move down, we've just already seen the field size. Below that, you will see 3 bars. And what these 3 bars represent is the sowing cycle, the growing progress, and the harvesting cycle. So a complete crop cycle consists of 3 stages. Now, to do the sowing, you need either workers or tractors. The growing process requires no exterior intervention whatsoever. But what I will say is that the growing progress or the growing cycle takes approximately 52 days. Now that is irrespective of the field size. So even a small field like this will take 52 days to grow. And then the harvesting progress needs a combine harvester. And it's also worth mentioning that both the sowing and harvesting time is very much dependent on the capabilities of the tractor or the harvester and how fast it would go. But I'll go into that in a little bit more detail later on. Now, the last one, it says here, harvesters crops ready to transport. And the way the game works is that when you're harvesting, the field acts as a store which can hold up to the entire amount which a field can generate. But of course, to get the crops out of the field to the farm or to a silo needs a covered hole. So that's basically the way farming actually works. Now, finish off this first section, what I want to do is just give you a little bit of a demo here, and what we're going to do is just connect up the roads here, and I'll just connect that there, just speed the game up. And this is a demo of the fact of how the workers work. What should happen is, you can see them all coming in now. Get them the right way round. What I suggest is pay attention to the animation and the sidebars and watch how fast these guys go. And if you can see, it's on the 16th of March at the moment. And what these guys can do is a medium field in just a couple of days. And strangely enough, if you can get enough workers into a field, this is the fastest way to sow or harvest a field. You can literally see them go like that. I'm sure I'm going on fast, but you can see we've, what's it, 17th now? We might just get to the 18th on this. I mean, be generous. We've done, there we are, so it's just finished. Be generous, say it took us 2 days to actually sow this field. This one's going a little bit slower, but that's it. So that is a very good demonstration of the fact that you do not need a farm to actually raise crops. I know it seems trivial, but that is something that's quite important. But what you do need to be aware of is that I would not recommend using buses to send workers to fields. The reason for that is exactly what I said about the growing progress. You can see here there's no workers there, so it would introduce a really high level of micromanagement into the game, because what you'd have to do is set up bus routes to bring workers in for the sowing period, then cancel the routes for the 51 days or so while it's growing, and then put the buses back on again to do the harvesting. So it's a very cumbersome process which you do need to be aware of. Having said that, it is a little bit of a dodge if you happen to put fields near a city to get this area going. And I think that kind of brings us to the end of the first part of the video. So what we're going to do now is just move into the second part of the video where we're going to set the farm up. And if we come into here and just click on farm, you see that you get a small farm with 6 vehicle slots. Now, I'll be completely upfront. The small farm is exactly that. It's too small to be any use unless you are wanting to provide crops to a very small town which will never grow. The next one is a medium farm, which has got 12 slots, which has its uses, but I wouldn't recommend it for the current scenario. What we got here is the large farm with 30 slots, and you can see it's really big. Now, there's 2 reasons for building the large farm. One is that you can put all the available tractors and harvesters with a nice selection of covered holes to keep the whole system going. But more importantly, what you're going to need is the factory connections there. And what we're going to do now is just build this in quickly, build the farm up. If you're playing in this mode without seasons enabled, a large farm is something that you do need. Also, if you imagine that, say, we're pushing out this way and we're out in this area here, a large farm is also quite useful because you've got everything compact in one point. And what that means is that you don't have to put in things like gas stations, because the farm itself, as you can see here, actually has its own gas station here. Otherwise, if you were using the alternative way of doing things, which is to have a small farm that just contains tractors and harvesters, you would then have to set up a distribution system to collect your crops from the fields, which is okay, especially if you're looking to maximize crop collection. But for the current scenario, a large farm is quite adequate. Now, what you'll see here is we don't have any vehicles for it. And what you also see is that the building doesn't have a power supply. Now, if I build a single tractor, or buy a single tractor, go into here, we're just going to buy a single tractor just to show you this. What we'll do is, I think the T26 is actually the fastest, the tractor that's available in the base game. And when you're choosing a tractor, what you need to do is get maximum speed, and also what's called the sowing speed. So the maximum speed of this tractor is 15 and the sowing speed is 17. Now, there's a really nice tractor here which comes available in 1962 if you've got mods, which gives you a top speed of 35 kilometers an hour and 40 kilometers an hour, and I'll be demonstrating that in a little while. But of course, be aware that's a mod. But if we buy a tractor like that, what should happen is you can see that this tractor is working, but if I click on him, what you'll see is he has very little fuel. Now, he started this big field. Now, he will do the whole of this field with sowing, but because he's got very little fuel, he will eventually run out, but he will finish the field even if he runs out of fuel. But when vehicles run out of fuel, they go a bit slower. That's something else you need to remember. So what we need to do here is actually get some power into this building here so that we can get some fuel in here. Because if I assign this is a quirk of the distribution offices, if I assign that to here and say I want 100% fuel in here, nothing will happen, because the only way you can get fuel into these buildings is with a power supply. And of course, the alternative is that you can always put a small gas station next to the farm, but these farms provide all the facilities, so you might as well take advantage of them. So what we're going to have to do is put in a substation. I want to keep it relatively down in this area, like this. Actually, we'll kind of put it about there. We'll connect up with the mud road. Doesn't really make that much difference if he, as long as he's got a connection. And then we're probably gonna have industry here, so we're just connect that up, and we'll build that, and build that. What you'll see now is we've actually got power. And what you should see eventually is the fuel trucks will now show up. And now the next thing is storage. Now when you're playing with seasons disabled, storage isn't really a major factor, because what you can do is, you can see we've got 144 tons of storage in here. Now something I haven't mentioned so far is that when a field is harvested, it will immediately be sown when seasons is disabled. So storage isn't particularly that important, but we do need some storage just in case you get a bit of a glut. Also, you don't really want to connect factories directly to your farm. You want some kind of intervention store. Now I want to produce both alcohol and crops, which means that what we're going to do is come down to here, and this is where things can get a little bit messy. And what we're going to do is we're going to put one silo there and another silo right opposite, like that. Maybe actually we're going to put you over here, actually, because what we got now is 2 silos. Now these silos have a factory connection to them, and the way factory connections work is that when a passive store, which is silo is a passive store, has a connection to a building like a farm, that acts as an extension of the storage to this area here. You can see the fuel is just arriving, so we got nearly a whole series of fuel in there. And so that means what we've got here now is some storage. Now what I want to do now is we're just going to set up the rest of the farm, and I think for the get-go we're going to, I think just for the fun of it, guys, we're going to actually buy 1, 2, 3, and we're going to buy one of these. We're going to start with 4, and we're going to get 4 combine harvesters. We go 1, 2, 3, 4 of those for the moment. We're going to add extras, so I just want to start with 4. We see this guy, because he can go faster, he can even overtake, so he gets to the fields quicker. See which field he's going to go into. What you'll see is, so this guy's already going, but see the way he's racing up and down the field, which is compatible with the actual harvest here. And if I can get the camera right, if you watch this guy in the bottom left and this guy in the top right, you can see he's going, but he's not as fast as this one. And this is where, when you're sowing, it makes a difference. And I've done some testing, and with this tractor, you can probably sow a large field in 17 days. So that is something that you do need to bear in mind. And we're now getting these crops here. And of course, bear in mind that his guy is actually doing a medium field. And that is probably a good segue into setting up your fields. Now, if you watch a tutorial, you'll see that there's a specific pattern. But to be honest, when you're playing without seasons, what you want to do is just not bother. Just let the auto detect pick them up, because what you're looking for is a mixture of medium and large fields to be able to get an even balance of crops flowing into your silos. It's a lot different than when you play with seasons enabled, and I want to emphasize that. See, this guy's just gone back to get a full set of fuel, because of course because when he went out from the get-go, he only had a small amount of fuel because we just purchased him. So if we watch him now, what you should do is, what field are you doing? You're doing medium field 2. Let's just see if we can change the order. What we'll do is we'll turn off the auto thing and just pause the game for the moment. I'm going to remove you, and then if I put a large field in here, see if we can on the game into, it might not work, but we'll give it a go. Is that connected? When you put fields out, make sure they get connected, because they put mud connections in, and sometimes they don't always come in. So what we'll do is we'll add you there. And if you see here, if you want to check for the highlighting, you can put that one in there. And I think we've got everything else highlighted. Trouble is, I'm not sure whether we're going to get a tractor out of here. I think all the tractors busy. Just see. Yeah, I think the tractors are busy. I think this guy will finish first because the other one's there. We're a tractor missing. Where are you? Let's just check this guy's fuel. So this guy's empty. He's now going to go back to here and he will fill up. You can see he's making his way back to there. What I am going to do is just zap him because I don't want him. Just sell him. It's not that we've got a shortage of cash. Now, we look at this guy. He's still got some fuel, and what he should do is go up to the next field. So whenever a tractor or a harvester's got fuel, they will then go to the next field and bypass the farm. But if they run out of fuel, they will always go back to the farm. And this is the reason why you can do some fairly fancy things with respect to field allocation to optimize your fields, but that's technically outside the scope of this video. Now, before we move on to setting up the food factory, I just want to show you this area here. This lot's still growing. So what I want to do is just show you how these fields being harvested before we move on to the next section. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause the video, let these two fields run, and I'll be back when these are ready for harvest. Okay guys, welcome back. You'll just see that the growing season has just ended, but what you will see now is that the combine harvester is coming out of here. Our workers are coming in here. Now there's a good chance that the actual combine harvester won't get down to here before these guys have actually finished. You can see how fast that they can go. They've really got a crack on here. And this one's just flipped into the same mode. We've got workers coming into here now. And we got the second combine harvester coming. Now the reason I'm letting this run, because I want you to see the storage piling up in here. And also, this is a way that you can actually test the output of a field, is by not actually allowing the covered holes. And what you'll see is, bear in mind, this is a small field, and once it's finished, it will tell us exactly how much crops we got from each one of these fields. So we're just going to come in. Got the combine just made it, and he's just getting, maybe he might get one row, or maybe no, they're going to collide. You can see here what we got is 23.95 tons of crops from a single medium field. Now, if any of you play with seasons enabled, you will actually get a higher yield. I think the yield is 98 tons. So effectively, when you're playing with seasons disabled, you get about a quarter of what you would get if you were playing with it enabled. But it doesn't make any difference, so don't panic about this, guys, because what we're looking to do is get a continuous supply of crops, because as you'll see here, the crops haven't been picked up, but the actual tractor is already here, but he got there too late and this was already being sown. So this is an example of how the field cycle works. Right, this guy's actually cheated a bit. He's got there before the workers, because he got to that field and then this field was allocated. So you can see that this is going even faster. Now, of course, we've got crops in there. So what we're going to do now is just come up here and come in here, and we're going to buy some covered holes. What we're seeing here, and what we're going to do is put in 4 covered holes in here. What you want to try and do is match the covered holes to the number of combines, because the way the game works is that if we put in, say we buy another one, that often will not come out of the factory. What will happen is that these guys, oh no, they've got 2 come into each of these. Now the reason for that is the fact that these fields contain crops in storage. But if you get a situation where the harvester is still doing a field, what the covered hole will do is come in here, pick up any surplus, and then wait until he fills up. And while he's waiting, the farm doesn't seem to dispatch a second covered hole. Now, the next thing you want to be aware of is that when crops are dropped off into a farm, the load is actually split between the two. This is one of the risks of actually tying a farm directly to your food production, which is a good segue into food production. So what we got now is we got a farm working, we got our crops going out there, we got a small amount of crops into here. And as I say, the natural inclination would be for maximum efficiency is to do something like this, which if you could connect both up, it would make a difference. Now, there are mods that will allow you to do that scenario, especially there is a mod that is available that gives you multiple connections to the standard base game silo. Another thing you need to remember is that this says a maximum capacity of 800s, but a total capacity of 1,000. So each one of these will hold 800 tons of crops. Now, this is not really a problem when you are playing with seasons disabled, simply because if you get things flowing correctly, you will get crops regularly flowing in all year round. Having two stores of 800 tons is more than sufficient. The reason I've put them in like this is just to show you as an example. But truthfully, we only really need one. But the problem with that is connections. This is the reason why modded silos can make a difference. So what we got now is the farm supplying crops to these two silos. And what I want to do now is just going to put in a cargo station here. I want it to fit that way. And we're just going to try and get that connector. Oops, I want it the opposite way. Please game. And what we're going to do is just put that in there. And we're going to put a road connection in there. And if we build this, and what that means is that this cargo station can draw from both these silos, which I've already mentioned is a little bit overkill. We only really need one. I know some people say, well, why am I not putting the food factory directly onto these silos? The reason is that what I want to do is supply both food and alcohol, and what I need to do is to control the transfer of the crops to ensure a food supply. And I suppose that is now a good segue into food side of the business. And what we're going to do is put this down here, and what I want to do is put in a couple of silos down here. So we're just going to come in here. Now what I'm going to do here is actually use individual silos. What we're going to do is put one here. Now factory connections won't cross roads, so what we're going to do is put one silo there and another silo there, and we're just bring the road connection from here to here, connect you up to there and you to there. And what we're going to do is just build this. Now what I'm doing here is not using the cargo connector. The reason for that is that I want these silos, one to supply the distillery and one to supply the food factory. We're a little bit close to the residential area here, which could be a bit tricky, but we'll be okay. The food factory does produce pollution. It produces about 7.5 tons per year, but what we're probably going to do is expand the city this way to get to the steel mill, maybe. So I think that we'll get away with that. We can push it over a little bit. So what we got now is two silos with two slots in, and what we can do now is we can kind of be a little bit, get a bit more space by pushing the, so we could probably do it this way, and we'll put the food factory there, and then we're going to put the distillery. We need to flip it that way. So that's going to be the wrong way round. Well, we could probably get out between the two silos. I don't want that there. I want this. Actually, we can do it that way. And what we're looking to do is we've got the food factory, the distillery, and of course what we need is an output in the form of storage, and because we can just put the warehouse in here. like that. And we can push this in quite close to save a bit of money. And then now warehouses only have one exterior connection, so as a major pickup point it's useless. So what we need to do is put in a cargo station, and again we're just going to face it in that direction because that's where the town is, and we'll just drop you in here. So what we got now is we've got a silo here that will take crops for the distillery, and the silo here which will supply the crops to the food factory. And then what we're going to do is put a road in. I think we'll come out a bit like that, or maybe a bit further away. And I think for the purposes of this, connect this. This is going to be the main connection in. And then what we're going to need, so we got the connections to the silos. This side, obviously, we're going to have to put another road down this side. Oops. I'm consciously building on a grid actually. I'll just put a road down this side, and then what can happen is these connections can be made there, there, because of course we need to grant fire access, and then the grid. Now the next thing we need to do is actually get workers into here, and to put workers in we're going to need not a cargo station, bus stop, and I'm going to put a bus stop about here. We'll put it there. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very quickly build these roads in because we want to see it working. You can see the road crews are out here already, but they're actually going to save us a little bit of money. Just build that connection there. Oops. We'll leave them that road. Maybe that road. Build this. And of course we could build the factory, brewery or distillery. Get that built. And we'll put the factory connection in. We need the warehouse built. We've got the factory connection to there. And the cargo station. You see now the factory's built. What you want to do is put limit on. And then what you can do is probably push up the food, and we'll leave the alcohol at 28 tons for the moment. And we'll just build that. We've now got this road bus stop connected. So just you down to there, hook you through to there. And just to make it a bit easier for the buses to come in, just hook you to there. Now the reason I put a bus stop in is the fact we want to distribute the workers between the two factories. Now the problem we got now is that the bus stop's here, and if I click on the bus stop, you'll see it will actually get to the silo, but it won't get to this distillery. But there's a way that you can do it. But first you need to do is check where the pedestrian pathways is. The pedestrian pathway is there. Now if you go up to here, you'll see there's a pedestrian underpass, and what we'll do is we'll just sneak the underpass there, and we'll put the side over here. It needs to point at this, so I'm kind of, I think it's a little bit tight. We press control, we don't, and then if you go underground, the game can get a little bit strange sometimes, but I personally find underpasses a lot easier to put in rather than overpasses, especially over multiple connections. If you try to go over, what will happen is the game can be a little bit strange with respect to getting over these factory connections because it's spacing between them. So we've now got a bus stop there, and these are built, and what you'll see now is we can get the workers into the what we call it, the distillery. And what we're going to do now is just pick up a couple of buses over here. Again, buying buses, a couple of those. They've got speed with a reasonable capacity, which is compatible with the food factory. Set this up the way it is, and then we will get them to deliver there. And we'll just click that, open this up, click this, come back to here, this, get you there, enable, put the line spacing on. What that will do is bring out workers to here. And what we'll have now is we got the factory here. Let's have a look at what we got here. We got crops in there, we got the 2 silos there. So we've now got everything set up. It's got no power supply. Okay. What we're gonna have to do is just drop a power supply in the center. Oh well, we'll do it that way. We're gonna need. What you can do is get this out, go to there. Technically, we don't need a asphalt road for. And we'll just build this. We've now got power in here, and it just tells us no workers, missing crops. Now, what we're going to do is put in here is a distribution office. Now, what I want to do is control the amount in each one of these silos, with the priority going towards the food silo, because obviously food is more important than alcohol, because especially at this point in the game, alcohol is more a way to make money rather than actually kind of serving your population. Because I don't think at the moment we've got a pub or anything like that, because it's not necessary, because we got 95% happiness. And something you need to be aware of is that if you add alcohol to your economy, it does improve happiness, but it also makes everyone a bit more unhealthier. So what we're going to do now is come in. Never find the distribution offices, and we're actually going to go for that's probably a bit over the top. Distance doesn't really justify that. We're going to put a distribution office in here and just build you like that. Then we're very quickly build some cupboard holes. Oh no, that's dollars. We don't have any dollars. And so what we're going to do now is just come in here. And we'll buy 1, 2, 3, 4. I think 4 should be enough. And what I'm going to do is use the pickup. Now, I always like to set these with cargo stops, and then we'll put you there. And we're going to have an unload there. And we're going to leave you at 30%. And we're going to put you in there. And we're going to reduce you down. I don't know if I can get this any lower. Let me just try. 5%. 10% is the minimum. And these 2 drop-off spaces is probably more than enough to keep the crops flowing into here. Obviously, with practice, you can come up with more sophisticated systems. This is just the basics. One way you can restrict the construction is actually to reduce the workforce right down as well. So we don't need massive amounts of alcohol. We want more of them. We'll put you down to 10. And again, we don't want 130 people in here. We'll leave you at, say, 60. What you'll see straight away is that this is coming into here. We're starting to produce food. And so what we got now is the chain happening. And what you see now is that these fields are now being harvested. In fact, it looks very much like these are now being sowed a second time. So we are getting quite a lot of crops flowing into here. But now we've got the food production and alcohol production going. What we got is that what should happen is that the game should get into a kind of equilibrium here. Just want to make sure those are allocated, and we've got this here. Now, over time, what you want to do is keep an eye on, make sure that your fields are emptying. I think at the moment we've got this well under control, and we've now ensured that our food supply is working. We're producing some alcohol. which is coming into here. Probably not. Now, of course, the warehouse is an extension of these, and but the cargo station here can only see what's in here. It won't pull through into this factory. So that's something you do need to be aware of. So at the moment, we've got food in here, but we've got no alcohol. And what we can do now is we're just going to put another distribution office here. And we'll just put a small one in. We can just tuck it in this corner. Oh no, we want to get in the way of the power line, so we'll just put you there. And we're just going to build you. Like that. Now, the trucks I chose for here were the high capacity ones. But this office here is actually going to be distributing the food locally and possibly. So what we need to do, I mean, we've got some more. We probably need about 2 of these. And your job is going to be to pick up from here. You're going to pick up the crops and you're going to go to there. And you're going to go there. You're going to, not crops, food, sorry. And we're going to set that to 100%. And what that should do is start getting enough food in here to actually get things done. And then the original office, which was here, is now no longer needs to import food, but he's going to still have to import clothes. So we can set that there. And how many vehicles we got in here? It seems a bit overloaded, but that could be down to the fact that, oh no, we don't have a traffic jam. So what we've now got is we're now importing clothes, but our food is now coming from this area here. And we're actually now starting to get a little bit of alcohol. So, because clothes actually pulls up less than other, what we can do now is come here and say collect alcohol, and what we can do is go to the customs one and we'll just export alcohol for the moment to make some money, because you see here, if we come to prices, you see that we can get 279.78 rubles per ton of alcohol. So we can start a little bit of an alcohol export market just at the moment, and we can ship that out on the way. What we'll do, clothes consumption generally doesn't come that far, so what we can do is set this to 100%. No, it's not storage, sorry. No, we want this set to 0. Anyway, so we've now got our farm set up and our food supply set up. Eventually we'll be making some money from alcohol, and there's also the potential that once we get a large amount of food in here, we could start exporting food. But to do that, we'll have to set up another separate distribution office. We can see now we're getting surplus in here, so we'll stop. We can turn off. Eventually, once we know the system is stable, we can turn off the auto purchase. And what we are getting now, you can see here that we got the even distribution between the 2 silos. If you look at the fields here now, we should be getting a mixture of harvesting. In fact, getting a little bit of a surge of harvesting, but these are growing. And I think just to make it a little bit more interesting is that if I come over here and we're just putting another field, because when you're playing with seasons not enabled, if you can stagger the fields, you can ensure a constant supply of crops. But that's just polishing everything, and we'll just build that and that, and well, we can just let the road crews build that road. That's been picked up, and you can see straight away it's just told us that we've allocated a tractor to it. So what will happen is that, so we've now got all cycles representative. We got harvesting there, growing there, and eventually we will have some sowing there. So what we'll get, so the idea is to get a fairly reasonable progress going. What you do need to do is keep an eye on this situation It says fields requires mechanisms. So what we probably could do with is buying another combine, and of course we probably need another covered hole to match it. So we've now got that. What is that? I'm not exactly sure what you're doing there, but get rid of you. I don't like you. Sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we got 1, 2. We've got 4 tractors. I mean, generally speaking, with these modded tractors, so you don't need these ones, so you can work with less tractors. But so we can see we got that working there now. So that finishes up food supply, and what we're going to do now is just go to the final stage of this video, which is the differences between playing with seasons disabled and seasons enabled. And probably the most significant thing is the fact that, unlike this pattern here where you've got all 3 activities going on at the same time, when you play with seasons enabled, you only get 1 harvest per year, which is in a contrast to, just as an example, that a medium field has the potential for 4.5 harvests per year, and I think the large fields is 2.78 harvests per year. But with seasons enabled, you only get 1 harvest per year, and the growing season starts on the 4th of March. That's when the tractors all leave and go out and start sowing the fields, and that's where the sequence of fields here is quite important. And the general trend is to have a whole series of medium fields which equate to the number of tractors you got, to do the medium fields first, which will, so that the tractors can do the medium fields and then go straight on to the large field. And the sowing season will run until the I think it's about the 17th of May. Now, any field that started before the 17th of May will continue. It isn't a hard cut-off. So that's something else you need to remember. So if your tractor manages to get in on, say, the 16th or the last possible moment, it will spend time actually sowing that field. And then, of course, you've got the 52-day growing season, which lasts until about the 17th of July. I think there is a cut-off in there. I think it's around the 14th or 15th of July. If there's a field which has completed its growing season when that date passes, the harvesters will go out. And what will happen then is the harvesters will go out, the covered holes will go out, and then you will start harvesting right through until the temperature drops, which is normally the middle to the end of November. But what, again, the similar as with the harvesting, well, if a harvester gets into a field before the temperature gets too cold, they will keep going to keep delivering the crops. Don't be too obsessed about when the harvesting actually finishes. The key cutoff date is around the 4th of December, because what happens then is that when that date hits, it's deemed to be too cold, and any field that's partially harvested like this will just go black. Any stored crops will be lost. So this is why it's important to have a covered hole in here, gathering the crops as the harvester is picking up, because any stored crops are lost, any unharvested crops are lost after the 4th of December. Then you get absolutely nothing until the 4th of March, when the cycle starts again. What that actually means is that when you've got having 1 harvest a year, there is a period from the 4th of December to the 17th of July when there are no crops coming into the system. So what you've got to do is plan farms which can get a surplus of crops, which can then be stored in silos. One thing you do need to be aware of is that you do get a lot more crops from fields when seasons is enabled. For example, a medium field will produce about 98 tons of crops, and a large field will produce about 300 tons of crops. So you get a lot more crops, which means you also need a lot more storage. And to be completely upfront, there's no way these 2 silos could store the output from all these fields. So a quick calculation: 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 2100, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. So this farm from a single season has the potential to generate 2,600 crops. But be aware that once you get to the 17th of July, when the crops start running in, what happens is that the crops immediately start flowing into your food and alcohol production if they're waiting for crops to arrive. So when you're playing with seasons enabled, what you're looking to do is build up surpluses of food in your warehouse or any other production facility to balance the system through. Also, a farm like this close in was probably not going to work. And what you're looking at is building really big mega farms with a farm in the center surrounded by fields, possibly with a rail connection to bring the crops into this area here. So what you'll be looking at is actually redesigning this to have a rail input line, and that is the main changes. And the one thing I would say is that, to be completely upfront, that if you're going to play with seasons enabled, what you really do need to do is look at some mods. And if you go to storage in here, just as a quick example, I know technically we're not playing mods, but you can get really big grain silos like this, which have got 3,000 tons in. But more importantly, you can get silos like this. This one's got 8,000 tons storage, and more importantly, it's actually got a rail connection. So if you imagine that you've got something like this being fed by trains from different directions, and that's being stored, and you could run two food factories, distillery, all sorts of stuff from that, assuming that you've got 3 or 4 farms supplying in. So that's the primary difference between playing with seasons enabled. You've got to think a lot more on an annual scale, and you're looking at getting lots of production into storage, and possibly having at the end of the harvesting sequence at least a few major storage with several thousand tons of crops in storage. So this is where I'm going to leave it. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Hope you found it interesting. Any comments or questions, feel free to chuck it in the video description and I'll try and answer them. And until next time, whatever you do, enjoy your gaming.